Hey everyone, my name is Becca and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad that you stopped by, and if you have been with me before, then welcome back. Today we are going to be reading the first chapter of Magnolia Wu, Unfolds It All by Chanel Miller. Chanel Miller is a New York Times best-selling author who wrote a memoir called Know My Name. So we're going to dive into the first chapter of this novel, and we're going to start by reading the synopsis on the front inside cover. Down at the bottom of the tall buildings of New York City, Magnolia Wu sits inside her parents' laundromat. She has pinned every lost sock from the laundromat onto a bulletin board in hopes that customers will return to retrieve them. But no one seems to have noticed. In fact, barely anyone has noticed Magnolia at all. What she doesn't know is that this is about to be her most exciting summer yet. When Iris, a new friend from California, arrives, they set off across the city to solve the mystery of each missing sock, asking questions in subways and delis and plant stores and pizzerias, meeting people and uncovering the unimaginable. With each new encounter, Magnolia learns that when you're bold enough to head into the unknown, things start falling into place. Now, the first chapter is particularly long, so I'm going to read approximately the first 10 pages, give or take, whenever I feel like it comes to a natural stopping point. There's a lot of really great illustrations in this novel, so I'll share this first one here with you. And this first chapter is titled The Bing Qiling Bubble's Birthday. Magnolia Wu was almost 10. She was eager to turn 10 because the number 9 looked like a sprout coming out of the ground, small and easily stomped. 10 was a strong 2-digit number that looked like a sword and a shield that belonged to someone who was about to conquer the world. But Magnolia Wu was not about to conquer the world because all summer she'd been stuck inside Bing Qiling's Bubbles laundromat, where her parents had worked since she was born. And there would be no birthday party. Magnolia did not have a single friend in New York City. This was not an observation to be mean. If anybody asked her, she would have said the same thing. She used to have one friend, but that friend moved away to the suburbs because of grass. Many families moved out of the city to be closer to grass. In addition to being alone, she was too hot. It was so hot that snails nearly melted on the sidewalks and pigeons seemed to be panting. Magnolia sweat on her nose, behind her knees, and even inside her belly button. Her internal organs boiled like sweet potatoes. At least that's what she felt like. Magnolia crouched on the floor of the laundromat, stretching her arm beneath a washing machine until she found what she was looking for, a single sock. She pulled out the dusty sock, took a thumbtack from a wooden box, and pinned the sock onto a bulletin board. The board was full of lost socks, solo and abandoned, separated from their pairs. To Magnolia, each sock was a mystery, and she waited for the day that their owners would return to claim them. She wondered where the socks had been, if they'd trekked through mud or snow, climbed a flowering hillside, or danced on Broadway stages. But so far, no one had come back. The socks forgotten or replaced by whatever other important thing adults were out there doing. As Magnolia stared at the socks on this very hot day, she began to wonder if she was silly for thinking they'd lead to anything. Most of her classmates were on vacation for the summer, which meant lobster rolls and berry picking and frog catching in boats with napkin white sails. Meanwhile, Magnolia collected quarters from the washers and dryers, helped her parents sift through the mail, and restocked the detergent. As she looked around at the spinning machines, she wondered if she'd be stuck here for the rest of her life, inside a loop of endless loads and the comings and goings of customers. Magnolia used to be excited by her daily tasks. When she was little, Magnolia's mom fed clothes into the circular mouths of the washing machines, pretending they were robots that slurped up sleeves. Mr. Wu rolled Magnolia around in the metal laundry cart that he nicknamed Cage Ferrari. They made paper sailor hats and pretended they were in a submarine, staring into the washing machine window like it was a dark, stormy sea. She was even allowed to paint a fire-breathing dragon on the laundry delivery cart attached to his bicycle. But it came out looking like a lizard barfing orange juice. Whenever Magnolia asked her mother why they never went on vacation, Mrs. Wu's answer was always the same. No time. Too busy. Too expensive. The only times she'd seen her mom rest were when she watched movies on her laptop and snacked on dried salted plums on the phone with Auntie May. Magnolia hoped they could at least create a spa day, placing cucumber slices over their eyes, but knew her mom would never waste food by putting it on her face like that. Luckily, Magnolia had Mr. Pants, the family dog. The Wus hadn't planned on getting a dog, since dogs shed hair on clothes, and hair causes customers to sneeze, and customers write bad reviews on the internet. But one winter night he wandered in and burrowed beneath a warm pile of laundry. The next morning he emerged with a pair of pants on his head and secured his position in the family. So this was how the days passed, full of heat, dangling socks, a sleeping dog, and rumbling machines, while her dad pedaled through the city making deliveries, and her mom folded mountains of clothes until the sky turned black. On the morning Magnolia turned 10, she decided that if she was going to be stuck all summer in the Big Apple, she'd find a way to be a wild worm, freely wiggling and chewing through all of it. She pocketed some crumpled dollar bills to buy a soft pretzel from a nearby street vendor, then licked chunks of salt off the pretzel's skin. Her eyes followed the clouds that grazed past the tip of the Empire State Building, half hoping they would pop. She sculpted gray sharks out of dryer lint, displayed them in a line atop the cash register. Finally, she illustrated a frowning chimney on their no smoking sign. Then she was out of things to do. Right around lunchtime, Mr. Wu emerged from the back room yelling, "Happy birthday!" He'd safety pinned candy around a cloth tape measure and draped it like a necklace around Magnolia's neck. Mrs. Wu presented Magnolia with a bowl of red bean ice cream in one hand, a thick scented candle in the other. Mrs. Wu believed that birthday candles were a needless expense. If they already had scented candles, Magnolia could blow those out instead. A candle is a candle. Why buy teeny tiny ones, she'd said. Magnolia hesitated before blowing it out, knowing that as soon as she did, her parents' attention would be pulled back into work. So she took a long inhale, then blew out the candle with her nose to amuse her dad. She assumed that was it, that the day would return to its regular programming. But Mrs. Wu said, "I have a surprise." Mrs. Wu said that her old friend, Mrs. Lam, had recently moved to New York from Santa Cruz, California, and she had a daughter Magnolia's aged named Iris. Usually when Mrs. Wu tried to set Magnolia up with one of her friend's kids, it was not good. That was called a forced friendship, and the chances that the stars would align were extremely low. Once Magnolia met one of her mom's friend's kids named Kyle. Kyle showed her his ant farm, and it looked like if you took the period at the end of a sentence and poured about 2,000 of them into a glass box. All the ants were so dry and dead in there that Magnolia lost all trust in her mom to make proper friend arrangements. "That's nice," said Magnolia. "I'm happy to meet her someday." "You'll meet her today. She's on her way over," said Mrs. Wu. "Mrs. Lam is picking up her laundry and she's bringing Iris." "Here? She's coming here?" said Magnolia. Magnolia had never been comfortable with people her age visiting the laundromat. In fact, whenever a classmate entered, Magnolia ducked below the counter or burrowed inside a pile of clothing to hide. She wasn't proud of this, but she felt it was necessary for her social survival. At school, a boy named Aspen had a habit of tossing his hoodies at her and saying, "I'll give you $2 to wash this." When she told him to stop, he'd smile and say, "What? I thought your parents made a living off sweaty clothing." When Magnolia saw the laundromat through her classmates' eyes, she became self-conscious of the smallest things. The Christmas ornaments dangling from their potted plants year-round, the statue of Guangong in his shrine surrounded by oranges and burning incense set out as offerings, the pile of strangers' underwear stacked on the counter, the recycled peanut butter jars they used as pencil holders, the way her dad wore a Snoopy sweater and floppy sandals, while other dads strode down the street buttoned up in crisped collars and polished shoes. "Can't I meet her somewhere else?" said Magnolia. Just then, the bell above the door tingled. In walked a woman in a maroon tracksuit, stamped with the words, "Salty Muscles," followed by a girl Magnolia's age. Mrs. Lom was an aerobics instructor at Salty Muscles Fitness Studio down the street. To Magnolia, the name sounded like a seafood restaurant, but sweat was technically salty, so she supposed it made sense. "Ah, is that Magnolia?" said Mrs. Lom. "You may not remember, but I met you when you were this big." Mrs. Lom held out her hands as if she were holding an invisible loaf of bread. Magnolia obviously did not remember meeting her, because when you're a baby, your brain is basically a lump of silly putty. "Mrs. Lom helped us when we moved in," said Mrs. Wu, carried a washing machine over her head. Mrs. Wu handed Mrs. Lom her folding bag of laundry, and the two moms began catching up, which left Magnolia alone with Iris. Iris looked at Magnolia, but did not say a word. "So," said Magnolia, "both of our names are flowers." "I sometimes wish my name was Rachel," said Iris. Magnolia brushed this comment aside and made another attempt. "What's Santa Cruz like?" said Magnolia. "It's like heaven, I guess. Blue ocean, white clouds." How are you liking New York City?" said Magnolia. Iris made a small frown. "The subway is too crowded. The air smells like baked diapers. The other day I saw a dead rat in a puddle, guts floating everywhere." She's a grass person, thought Magnolia. "The city has everything you need," said Magnolia. "Name one thing the city doesn't have." "A mountain," said Iris. Who needs mountains, Magnolia thought. You can glide up elevators and get better views. She was about to give up befriending a girl who insisted on insulting her home. But then Mr. Pants trotted over and licked Iris's hand. And Iris did not say ew. She said, "Hello to you too." And Magnolia warmed up to her in that instant. All right, I'm going to stop there. That was about half of the first chapter of Magnolia Wu Unfolds It All. All right, if you enjoyed this first chapter Friday read aloud, please consider liking and subscribing. And until next time, everyone, happy reading.